Among the dense, dark forests near the village of Forgotten Creek, there was a legend of dead lights. The locals said that in the forest, where a rare ray of sunlight broke through the branches, one could sometimes see a strange glow of pale blue lights that appeared only at night. These lights are the souls of those who got lost in the forest and could not find their way back, the old villager said, shaking her head. They lure travelers into the depths, and then they disappear. Ivan, a young photographer, came to the village to capture its natural beauty. When he heard about the legend, he only grinned. Lights, you say? Well done, he said. This is going to be a terrific piece for my blog. In the evening, Ivan, armed with a camera and flashlight, went to the forest. Locals discouraged him, but he was sure the legends were nothing more than fairy tales to scare tourists. The forest greeted him with deafening silence. Only the rustle of the wind and the rare cry of a bird broke the gloomy calm. After walking a few kilometers, Ivan began to notice strange things. His flashlight seemed to shine dimmer than usual, and the trees, growing ever denser, formed a thick ceiling of branches over his head. But suddenly he noticed a faint glow in the distance. It was a bluish light, like tongues of flame hovering above the ground. There they were, he whispered excitedly and grabbed his camera. As he got closer, the lights began to move as if calling him to follow them. Ivan, mesmerized by the sight, followed. How beautiful they are, he muttered, taking pictures. But the farther he walked, the stranger his surroundings became. The air became heavy, and it seemed that the trees began to change. Their trunks warped, and their branches resembled hands reaching out to him. The lights disappeared, and the forest plunged into darkness. Ivan froze. In the silence came a whisper, barely audible, but ominous. Come back, before it's too late. Who's there? He shouted, trying not to show fear. The answer was only the crackling of branches behind him. Turning around, he saw a shadow slip between the trees. And then the lights appeared again. They surrounded him, but now their light was faint, dead, and their movements were sharp, as if they were dancing in a sinister rhythm. You have found us, came a voice, but will you be able to leave? Ivan felt a chill go through his body. Ivan froze, feeling his breathing become heavy. Lights hovered around him, illuminating the forest with an eerie, unnatural light. The voices coming from the darkness grew louder, merging into a strange whisper that gave him goosebumps. Who are you? He shouted, trying to shout over the noise in his head. The answer was a new whisper. We are those who remain, and you will stay, too. Ivan felt the ground beneath his feet shake slightly. The trees around him seemed to come alive. Their branches stretched toward each other, weaving into a dense wall, cutting off his way back. He turned on the flashlight, but its light barely pierced the darkness. All he could see were lights flickering farther into the depths of the forest. No, this can't be true, he whispered, trying to convince himself that it was just a hallucination. But as he took a step back, there was a strange crunching sound from the ground, as if something was breaking. He looked down and was horrified to see that he had stepped on a skull half buried in the soil. Someone was here, he muttered, but before he could finish his thought, the lights from behind the trees appeared again. Follow the light. This time the lights moved faster, as if in a hurry to lead him further into the forest. Ivan felt something inside him compelling him to follow them, despite his fear. It's just a dream, he repeated to himself, but the cold wind that blew past made it clear that it was real. The farther he walked, the more the forest seemed alien to him. The trees were completely black now, their roots intertwined, forming strange patterns. The smell of rot lingered in the air. Ivan stopped at a clearing. In the center of it stood a stone covered with strange symbols that glowed with the same bluish light as the lights. What is this? He whispered, taking a step closer. When he touched the stone, the lights flashed brighter, and a voice sounded in Ivan's head. You have found us. You are now a part of us. The stone became hot, and Ivan jerked his hand away sharply. The symbols on its surface began to move, forming into patterns he couldn't understand. Suddenly footsteps sounded behind him. He turned around and saw a figure. It was a man, but his face was indistinguishable, as if obscured by a haze. You shouldn't have come here, the stranger said in a low, muffled voice. Who are you? What is this place? Ivan shouted, stepping back. This place belongs to the lights, replied the figure, and those who see them stay here forever. The lights began to approach, circling around Ivan faster and faster. You have a choice, said the stranger. Either you find a way out, or you become one of us. Ivan felt the adrenaline rush into his blood. He sprinted in the opposite direction, but the forest seemed to oppose his escape. Tree roots gripped his legs, and lights chased him, illuminating his path. "You won't get away," whispered the voices. Suddenly, he saw a faint light ahead, not dead blue, but warm, sunny. It was the exit. Ivan rushed there, but the shadows were already thickening behind him, and the lights were surrounding him more and more tightly. Ivan ran as hard as he could, but each step became harder and harder. The forest seemed endless, and the roots of the trees reached for him as if they were trying to grab him. Lights swirled around him, emitting a low, ominous hiss. Ahead, among the branches, a warm light shone through. It was his only salvation. Almost there, Ivan exhaled, feeling his lungs burning from the exertion. But suddenly a shadow appeared in front of him. It was the same man whose face was hidden under the haze. "You can't leave," he said, raising his hand. Ivan froze. The light ahead began to waver, as if it were separated by invisible walls. The shadow stepped closer, its outline beginning to change. It was no longer a man, but something more, a figure made of branches and darkness, with empty eyes from which blue light streamed. "You must choose," the creature said. "Either you stay with the lights, or you bring them what they want." "What do you want?" Ivan shouted, trying to retreat. "They want a new light," the figure whispered, "one who will see them and bring others." Suddenly the lights surrounding Ivan slowed. Their light grew softer, and he saw that inside each one was a face hidden. They were people, eyes filled with fear, faces contorted with pain. "These are the ones who couldn't leave," said a voice from the darkness. "They stayed here to nourish the forest." Ivan felt terror overwhelm him. "No," he whispered, "I will not be a part of this." "Then you must prove your power," the creature replied. Another figure appeared in front of Ivan. It looked like him, but its face was blank, devoid of features. "This shadow is your reflection," the voice said. "You must defeat it to get out of the forest." The shadow moved at him, its movements swift, inhuman. Ivan barely had time to dodge, feeling the air around him grow dense. He grabbed a stick that was on the ground and tried to fight back, but the shadow was stronger. It threw him to the ground, and the lights around him froze, watching. "You will not leave until you accept your weakness," the voice said. "My weakness," whispered Ivan, realizing that strength would not help him win. He closed his eyes and stopped resisting. The shadow stopped, hovering above him. The lights began to move, their light growing brighter. Ivan felt something inside him change. The fear began to recede. "I see you," he said. "I understand." At that moment, the shadow disappeared and the lights rose into the air. Their light became soft and warm. The voice from the darkness no longer sounded threatening. "You have proven your power. You have seen us. Now you can leave." Ivan opened his eyes and saw that the light ahead had grown brighter. The forest began to disappear. The trees lost their shape and the ground beneath his feet became solid. He ran out of the forest and found himself in a clearing where the sun was shining brightly. Behind him, the forest seemed ordinary, quiet and peaceful. But he knew the dead lights were still there, waiting for the next traveler. Ivan returned to the village, but now he knew some secrets are better left unsolved. Sometimes when he looked at his photographs, he noticed a faint glow in the pictures of the forest. It reminded him that the forest of dead lights never forgets those who once saw its light. After returning to the village, Ivan couldn't shake the feeling that the forest had left its mark on him. Although he had gotten out, something inside him had changed. He grabbed a stick that was on the ground and tried to fight back, but the shadow was stronger. It threw him to the ground, and the lights around him froze, watching. "You will not leave until you accept your weakness," the voice said. "My weakness," whispered Ivan, realizing that strength would not help him win. He closed his eyes and stopped resisting. The shadow stopped, hovering above him. The lights began to move, their light growing brighter. Ivan felt something inside him change. The fear began to recede. "I see you," he said. "I understand." At that moment, the shadow disappeared and the lights rose into the air. Their light became soft and warm. The voice from the darkness no longer sounded threatening. "You have proven your power. You have seen us. Now you can leave." Ivan opened his eyes and saw that the light ahead had grown brighter. The forest began to disappear. The trees lost their shape and the ground beneath his feet became solid. He ran out of the forest and found himself in a clearing where the sun was shining brightly. Behind him, the forest seemed ordinary, quiet and peaceful. But he knew the dead lights were still there, waiting for the next traveler. Ivan returned to the village, but now he knew some secrets are better left unsolved. Sometimes when he looked at his photographs, he noticed a faint glow in the pictures of the forest. It reminded him that the forest of dead lights never forgets those who once saw its light. After returning to the village, Ivan couldn't shake the feeling that the forest had left its mark on him. Although he had gotten out, something inside him had changed. When he reached the clearing with the stone, the lights reappeared. They no longer looked threatening. Their light was soft, almost soothing. "You brought me back," he said, turning to the forest. Whispers came from everywhere. "You brought a part of us into your world. Now you must make a choice." A figure like the one he had seen in the photograph appeared in front of Ivan again. It was holding an object that looked like a bowl, with a faint smoke coming from it. "The seal will not disappear," the figure said, "but you can either become its bearer or return it to the forest." "What does that mean?" Ivan asked. "If you keep it, you will become a link between the worlds. You will see and feel what is hidden from others. But if you give it back to the forest, you will lose a part of yourself forever." Ivan felt his arm begin to throb with pain. The stone in the clearing began to glow, and the forest was filled with shadows again. "Choose," the voice whispered. Ivan realized that both choices would change his life forever. He stood in front of the stone, feeling the lights surround him. "I don't want to lose myself," he said, clenching his fists. "But I also don't want the forest to have power over me." He took the bowl from the figure's hands and poured its contents onto the stone. The symbols flashed brightly, and the entire forest was engulfed in shivering flames. The shadows screamed and disappeared, and the lights began to rise into the air, dissolving into the night sky. Ivan walked out of the forest feeling devastated. The mark on his arm was gone, but now he knew that the connection to the forest remained. Sometimes, in his dreams, he saw that rock and the lights that swirled around him. He realized that the forest had not forgotten him, but had given him a chance for a new life. Ivan left the village, but continued to search for answers. The legend of the dead lights became for him not just a mystical story, but a part of himself. Sometimes he noticed a faint glow in the distance, reminding him that the forest would always be part of his destiny.